Welcome to the Deep Dive,
Emerald City Hockey's Seattle Kraken podcast.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Deep Dive podcast, Emerald City Hockey, Seattle Kraken podcast. And RJ, this is a podcast of firsts and probable lasts. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I don't. What, are you leaving?
Yes, I am. This is my resignation. See ya, everybody. I'm out. No, this is the first podcast of 2025.
I should have had that one. That was easy.
Yeah, that was a gimme. And you know what, RJ? You probably should have the other one too. And that is, this is probably the last deep dive we will be doing with you as an unmarried man.
Oh, that's right. Okay, I should have had both of those.
So we're off to
how
a
much the wedding
great
planning is
start
just
here.
It shows how much the wedding planning is just frying my brain at this point. Like, okay, where do the coasters go at the tables? Where is everything?
Yes.
I can't think about big picture stuff right now, Dylan.
Yes.
Unfortunately, that's what this episode is. So
Yeah.
good luck to me.
Our Kraken player reviews, but yes, I thought I don't know. I thought you'd at least go 1 for 2. I'm not gonna lie.
No, fair enough. You know what? That is a reasonable expectation that I did not meet.
Yeah, that's fine.
Accountability.
What it is not, though, RJ, is our first sponsor with our wonderful new sponsor, Rico Tessendor, in the law offices of Rico Tessendor, personal injury attorney there. And it has been great to have him on. We're still getting comments on each deep dive episode of people welcoming Rico on board and everything. That's been really, really cool to see. And this whole kind of partnership is just kind of going well right from the beginning, and everybody's happy, and it's just been a great time having Rico on board. And while we hope none of you ever need his services, the odds say at some point someone out there will be involved in an accident, whether on the road, at work, or anywhere in between. And when you are, we hope you call Rico at 425-778-9800 or visit his website, ricotessendor.com, to schedule a free consultation. He's won millions of dollars for his clients and helped thousands of people in the greater Seattle area. And as a fellow member of the ECH community, we know he'll help you too. So just love having Rico on board for all of this stuff. RJ, we also got to talk about our Patreon schedule for this month. And go. Do you have something?
No, I was ready for you to throw it to me, but no, save some more words.
I was going to say Patreon schedule for this month, which, I mean, next thing up for Patreon will be us talking about the incredible time that we had at the PWHL game yesterday. That's going to be this next Red Glare episode, though it might be a couple days late because of the aforementioned wedding.
That's right. Yeah. Normally we'd be scheduled to record on the day of the wedding, so that probably won't work out. Thank you, everybody, in advance for understanding. But I can't wait to talk about our experience at the PWHL game between the Boston Fleet and Montreal Victoire. That was awesome to go to. So it was great also just like being a fan again. I'll get into it on the Red Glare, but just it was really cool going to a game as a fan. It's not an experience Dylan and I have a lot really anymore.
Yeah. I was going to say yesterday was the very first time that I ever entered Climate Pledge Arena through an entrance other than the media entrance. I had to stand in a line. Stand in a line and go through the metal detector. Are you kidding me?
Ridiculous.
Don't they
disrespect.
know who I am?
I know. So there's that. I mean, that awful thing. We'll probably talk half an hour just about how terrible that is. I'll do my bag policy rant, all that stuff. Make sure you tune into the Red Glare this week. It's going to be a fun time.
Yeah.
But in addition to the Red Glare podcast, we've got our 3 special events that we do every month. And it starts off with the Armchair GM stream. So I'll be doing my Armchair GM stream on January 24th at 7 p.m. We'll have plenty to talk about there as we maybe look at what a sell-off might look like, or depending on where the team is in the standings. If this continues, we'll have some larger changes that we can look at with the roster. Then following it up, January 27th against the Edmonton Oilers. That is our live game commentary. So we'll be watching along that game with our Terror of the Deep patrons. I'm looking up the time. It's 6:30 Pacific against the Edmonton Oilers, the Kraken's most recent opponent. We'll watch them try and see if they can avenge this last loss that they took a couple days ago. And then on the 31st, that's right, the last day of January, is the prospect chat for you, Dylan. I'll let you talk a little bit about it, but I cannot wait to hear your World Juniors takeaways.
Yeah, I mean, it will be going over all of the World Junior performances from the Kraken prospects. Kraken had 8 prospects there. We got, couple, in the medal games, obviously Edward Chalet kind of feels like the biggest performer from the World Juniors here for the Kraken. Helped Czechia win bronze with the game-winning shootout goal in
was a nice
the
move, too.
shootout. It was a sick move, and not only that, I mean, he scored the previous round in the shootout as well, just to keep Czechia in it, because Sweden had scored. They were shooting first. He had to score to keep them in it, and then he comes right back out the next time and is able to get the goal for the bronze medal. But he had an incredible tournament, captaining Czechia to that bronze medal. But lots of other Kraken prospects sprinkled throughout the tournament, and we're going to have video of them all and go over everybody and talk about them all. So I'm really pumped for this one. It's my favorite kind of prospect chat of the year, just because it's getting to go over World Juniors, which is my favorite like hockey event of the year. So I'm really looking forward to it. It's a shame we got to wait till the end of the month, but it's because I got to sort through all of the video that I recorded and pull out all the clips and everything like that. So apologies that it takes a little while to get there, but once it is, it's a good time.
Yeah, there's a lot of tape to go through, so I'm sure you'll have some good stuff. And I don't want to save this. I don't want to wait for the prospect chats. I'm just going to ask you now: is Edward Chalet the best shootout shooter in the Kraken organization right now, aside from the Kraken defenseman they won't let shoot?
Yeah, I was going to say, as far as people we've actually seen do it in any sort of meaningful context outside of a practice, yeah, I think he is. I think the Kraken right now could probably use Chalet when they go to a shootouts like the one we saw earlier this week with the Kraken.
All right. Well, thank you for that little preview answer there, because I'd love to see some different names in there. Maybe we'll get to see Chalet sooner rather than later.
Yeah, that would be solid for him. But yeah, looking forward to everything this month on Patreon with everybody. Like I said, so many great thoughts from yesterday's PWHL game. I will take this moment to apologize to 2 people that did stop me to say hi, and I was having a hard time hearing over all the crowd at the end there. So if you were the 2 in the Canucks Hockey Fights Cancer jerseys, I realized after the fact that what you had said at the end was "have a good day," and I did not process it at all in the moment, so I just kind of made a face. And then kept walking up the stairs, and then just kept walking up the stairs, because it dawned on me right when I'd gotten to the top of the stairs. So apologies for that, but otherwise it was good to see you, good to see everybody else at the PWHL game and everything. But that was bugging me last night. I was like, oh, how did I not just get that in the moment? Ugh. All right, RJ, Kraken. It's the midseason. Tonight is game 41 for the Kraken. We're doing Kraken player reviews, right? Normally we do kind of mid-season grades. We're not going to go through with the grade part entirely, but we're going to go through and give our analysis on each player and how they've been playing this season and talk about them from a review standpoint. And I mean, we know as a team, RJ, Kraken, not really where anybody wanted or really expected them to be. I think we all thought that they were going to be able to, at least more reasonably still be in the wild card hunt at this point of the year. Was not expecting to talk about a team, RJ, that is, basically trending worse than last year at this halfway point.
Right. And so, if you look at overall team, again, we won't, give a grade here, but as you said, the team has underachieved compared to expectations so far this year. And given that it's the halfway point too, I think we just kind of made the decision to shy away from grades, because this isn't really, it wouldn't be a complete grade for anybody, because the season is only halfway through. I know you can do halfway player grades, but we won't shy away from it at the end of the season.
If we do doing it.
Yeah. The full season grades, I think you can really give a solid grade to a full body of work, but I think you can go through half a season's worth of work for individual players and really make some good takeaways, right? And give some constructive analysis, right? Yep. So I think you can do that at the halfway point of a season, but a grade just feels like too much at this point.
Yeah, I agree. So we'll do our traditional, if you've listened to any of the times where we've reviewed the kind of player by player of the roster, midseason or postseason grades, we go net out, We'll start with the goaltenders, move on to the defensemen, and then get to the forward group. RJ, that means we are starting in net. And do we want to start with, well, actually, you know what? Before we get into going player by player through this roster, let's talk a little bit about larger roster stuff. And that includes who's injured right now, because I realized the player that we'd probably start with, Joey Daccord, not playing right now for the Seattle Kraken.
That's right. I think we do unfortunately need an injury update here. So Joey Daccord, we mentioned on the podcast last week because this injury did happen a little while ago, but he's still dealing with that upper body injury. Good news is he is skating with the team. He is, practicing with the team, taking shots from teammates, but he's not quite ready to go just yet. And last night, the Kraken announced that they have placed him and Yanni Gourde on injured reserve. And so the reason that they would do that is because it frees up 2 roster spots. And with those 2 roster spots, the Kraken then announced that they've called up Cale Fleury and Gustav Olofsson from the Firebirds. But that's what placing those players on injured reserve allows them to do, because right now they're in LTIR. It's not like they need any cap space. It doesn't free up any cap space putting them on IR, but it's for the roster spot. So I got some questions about why they would do this. So Joey Daccord, we'll start with him. He's dealing with that upper body injury, and they have placed him on IR retroactive to when he was hurt. That would be December 22nd. And so the rule for injured reserve is that basically a player has to stay on there for 7 days before they're eligible to return. So because they placed him retroactive to that date, it's already been more than 7 days. So Joey Daccord is eligible to return whenever. He won't be available for the game tonight against the Devils, but they can take him off IR at any given time, right? They just have to meet the roster limit of 23. They probably have to send somebody down. So he could return soon. I feel like he's probably trending toward returning, given that he's ramped things up. Dan Bylsma has said he is making progress. So we'll keep an eye on him and when he's able to come back. Then there's Yanni Gourde, might return a little bit later than that because he has been placed on IR retroactive to January 4th, because that's when he first missed. But because of that 7-day rule, the first that Gourde is eligible to return is January 11th at Buffalo. So that's the first game that we even could see him back, which means he's going to miss at least another couple games. And then Yanni Gourde, I'm going back to see, did they say upper or lower body on him? Was it lower body, I believe, right? So
yes,
he's dealing with a lower body injury. And so that's, didn't he have a lower body injury a little bit earlier in the season too? That's what he was dealing with last time he was out. So no word on if that's related to the previous injury or not, but that's not good to see for Yanni Gourde. He's going to miss at least a couple games. And then finally, I don't know if we even really need to talk about him, because Adam Larsson, who missed the end of the last game with an injury, was back for morning skate, and he will be available for the game tonight. So that is fantastic news, especially given with the Kraken calling up 2 defensemen. I figured that probably wasn't a good sign for Larsson's availability tonight, but turns out he'll be good to go, it seems.
Yeah, it appears so, and that's great to see. And I do wonder with the 2 defensemen call up if that's just because they are going to be going on the road trip. You're going to try to maximize out roster size. I'm hoping it doesn't mean that there's potential concern about Lars potentially re-aggravating whatever this injury is, and then wanting to make sure that they have enough bodies for the road trip. But it was a nice surprise to see him out there for morning skate and kind of ready to go, because as of just before that, we were not thinking that was going to be the case. So hopefully we see him tonight and everything's all good with Adam Larsson, and we don't have to worry about him missing any games, because that would be bad. That would be bad for this team.
It would, and I think all this news really speaks to a larger trend that just happens around the league at this time of year, right? At this time of the season, we're around the halfway mark. Every team is banged up. There are always players that are dealing with something, and so that's just something to keep in mind as we have players that are taking maintenance days from practice or working on a bump and a bruise, or might miss a game here and there. Feels like everybody's dealing with something around this time of year.
Yeah, it really does. And it's, we talked a lot about this last week on the deep dive and all the stuff that players have to put their bodies through and all of that kind of stuff. And it is a brutal time for them. It really is. All right, let's then move on to the player reviews. We're starting in net. Should we start with Joey Daccord, RJ? We just talked about him. He is out for now. We'll see if he comes back for the road trip or at some point along the way with the road trip. But as of now, Joey Daccord has been out for the last little bit, RJ, but still leading the Kraken in games played in net so far this season. And you know what? Picking up where he left off last year, right? Maybe got a little burned out towards the tail end of last season, but really he's been fantastic this year for them. 912 save percentage, 251 goals against average, over 600 with the quality start percentage for Joey Daccord. I mean, there's been stretches this year where he has really done everything he could to keep Kraken in games and potentially even steal a couple games for them along the way. He is proven that he is, lived up to that extension. I think that they signed him too. I know your thoughts on all goalie contracts and everything, but he has looked like he is capable of being the guy for this team as a true, starter.
Yeah, absolutely. I won't disagree with that. And I mean, I'll only point out that the extension hasn't kicked in yet.
Yes.
He's still on the old contract, but still, Joey Daccord has done everything the Kraken could have asked for him so far this season. And he even put himself in, I think, Vezina conversation early on in the season. Was a top 3 goalie by a lot of metrics. And he's fallen off a little bit from that. He's kind of more solidly in the top 10. I think he ranks 8th in goals saved above expected in the NHL, according to Evolving Hockey right now. But hey, you get a top 10 goalie for especially the 1.2 million that he's earning right now. That is a heck of a deal. And yeah, Joey Daccord has stepped up. He's won the starting job. He's clearly this team's starting goalie, and which is why we're starting with him.
Yeah, no, and I mean, there's really just not even too much to talk about. Obviously, we hope that he's able to make a full recovery and he's able to come back and play the way that he was playing, because look, he, like I said earlier, he gives the Kraken a chance to win every time he's in net. He was making saves this year that a lot of goalies just don't have business making, and he was making them night in, night out. Right, he was able to really help cover up for defensive breakdowns, odd man rushes against breakaways, all of that kind of stuff. He's just been so fantastic in dealing with it all. He's got the good size that you want from a goaltender. He's got great positioning. You know, he goes on his adventures, right? Like if you got to be critical about one thing in his game, there's still been a couple times this year where he kind of goes off on one of his goalie adventures, and if it doesn't go right, it's potentially a problem because he's not in the crease. But really, there's just not too much that you could really kind of point to in his game and be like, oh, he really kind of needs to tweak this or fix that. He's just been, as you said, like a consistent top 10, if not higher guy this year. I don't even know that there's anything else left to say, really.
No, I just want to add, I feels like he gets burned on those misadventures a lot less than he should. But I think that's something that is down to skill, right? It can't all just be down to luck when it's been consistently that long. And I guess one more thing I would say too is that he's handled a pretty heavy workload as well. I mean, he had that stretch from kind of November to early December, right, where he started 11 out of 13 games when Philip Grubauer was iffy. When Grubauer's play wasn't kind of at the point where it is now. And so he got them through that stretch by having to play a lot of games.
Yeah, no, and I thought he played fantastic through all of those. Let's go ahead, though, and transition over to Philip Grubauer, who has had a little bit more of a shaky season, I would say, so far. But, we talked about it. He's been playing better as of late here. I mean, this is a good example of a player that it feels like, again, if you were giving a grade on Grubauer's performance for this year, you'd probably want to wait until the end just because he's been playing a lot better here this last week or so coming out of the break since Joey's been out, RJ, than he was playing probably earlier this season. 17 games started, 5-11-1 record for Grubauer. The numbers, across the board, not as good as Joey Daccord's, but it at least feels like Grubauer gives the team a chance to win, right? He maybe not steal a game the way Joey has been able to steal games for this team, but it doesn't feel like at times in the past with Philip Grubauer and this organization that he's actively losing you games.
Right. I'd almost liken it to a game where if you want to just put the whole season's worth of work right into a game where a goalie lets in 4 or 5 goals, but they're making some of the late saves at the right moments and keeping a team in it in a high scoring game, which we have seen a couple of those actually from Philip Grubauer this year.
Yeah.
And that's the way I look at it, right? You never know when a team is going to need a backup, and that's what he has been this season, right? Their backup goalie. You never know when an injury is going to happen, and you're going to need your backup to step up and at least give you a chance to win games. And that has been right now. And that's exactly what Grubauer has done. He's given his team the chance to win these last few games, and it's really been up to the team in front of him whether they've won or lost, right? Do they
Yeah.
want to step up and play a good game? Do they not? And that's all you can ask, I feel like, from your backup goalie. Obviously you could look at the contract and say that is starter money, and and he is, I think, 64th out of 81 eligible goalies this season in goals saved above expected. So those numbers aren't good. The entire body of work, the numbers aren't good across the board, really. But at least his recent play, when they have needed him the absolute most, when Joey Daccord can't step up and take on those extra games because he's injured, he's played all right.
Yeah, he has. And, larger context stuff like we talked about with Joey, right? His extension kicks in next season. It's going to make the Kraken crease one of the most expensive around the NHL, having both of these guys there if they're both going to continue to be there. Grubauer has played well. I guess we could save it for your prospect chat or your armchair GM chat for if he's played well enough to potentially avoid the buyout this offseason or anything like that. But at least right now with this team and this team trying to figure out what they are and can they play consistently and what style of hockey are they going to play and can they start on time and all of those things, Grubauer is at least he's letting the team determine their destiny instead of kind of choosing one for them, like I said, has happened in years past. So I will take that from Philip Grubauer over the alternative.
Definitely. And if his play had continued kind of like that San Jose game, it could have gotten very, very ugly to this point, and it hasn't gotten ugly. So
yeah.
That's a positive.
Yes, definitely. Definitely. Moving up to the blue line, RJ. I mean, you could argue that the blue line has really been the Kraken's, bright spot this season. The addition of Brandon Montour has made the group as a whole a lot better. They've gotten good depth. Riker Evans having another, kind of full year as an actual starter and everything, has rounded out the depth that they had, bringing in a Josh Mahura as a good depth option for them. Let's see. Well, let's go pair by pair, and we can start, I guess, at the top, or do you want to start at the bottom, work our way up?
Let's start at the top.
All right. Then let's start with Vince Dunn, who, did miss 20 games this season. He has missed 20 games so far this season, but boy, in the 20 games that he has played, RJ, 18 points, and the entire team just looks like a completely different squad when he is out there. If, we talked about it earlier, no player on this team kind of means more to the group from an on-ice perspective than Vince Dunn. He's fantastic. He's looking like a true top pairing defenseman, RJ. He's done everything that the Kraken could ask of him so far this season.
Right. I think, a lot of the same things were used to describe Joey Daccord, right? You can describe Vince Dunn that way, where missing some time, but when he's been in the lineup, he's been fantastic. He's done everything they could ask for. And the jolt that he gave the team when he returned also, allowing him to go on a little bit of a mini run before things cooled off. I mean, Vince, and he's so fun to watch too. When he was out for that extended stretch, I forgot just how fun it was to watch Vince Dunn night in, night out, because he's always doing something that's going to draw the eye. He's always making some great play. I don't have much more to say about him except that he's just been fantastic, and hope he can stay healthy.
Yeah, and it's just been such a journey with Vince Dunn, kind of going back to like year one and him still learning a lot of things and very much learning from Adam Larsson once they were paired up after the trade deadline when Jeremy Lauzon left and everything, and watching the defender that really he's become, because I for my money, RJ, Vince Dunn is the best net front defender this team has. Like, he is just the best guy there.
I think you're actually right about that. And given a team that has Jamie Alexiak and Adam Larsson, maybe it speaks a little bit more to those two, because I don't know that you could always say that about Vince Dunn and his time in Seattle, but I think Dunn has improved, and those two I think really have just gotten older. But he just, you can put him out in every situation too, like even on the penalty kill, right? He's still one of the better defensemen, and he's truly the MVP of this team, certainly in the sense of just the most valuable player, which is what MVP stands for. Nobody is more valuable to this team.
Yeah, no, definitely. And only 20 games, and he's tied for 4th on the team in goals, which
that is wild.
It speaks very highly of Vince Dunn's abilities. Maybe not as much for a lot of guys on the rest of the team, but we'll get there. But yeah, Vince Dunn, just absolutely fantastic so far this season. His defensive partner, Adam Larsson, RJ, we talked about him. Sounds like he'll be back for tonight, which is good news. He's definitely not going to put up the offense the way Vince Dunn does, only 7 points on the season. But I do feel like this has been a nice rebound year for Adam Larson, who struggled down the stretch last season, right? Had a lot of us kind of wondering, oh, what happened to Lars here? What's going on? He has bounced back, I feel like, pretty heavily this year and has been a lot more reliable defensively.
He certainly looked better than last year. I do want to ask you though, because I know you have kind of more of a focus in on Adam Larson than most. I know you're a fan of his game, right? And especially after last season, I know you were critical, right, of how he was
Mhm.
playing. And I know at times this season you've turned to me and said, "Oh, this is a bad Larson game. Like
Yeah.
he's not playing well, right?" Where do you think that balance is? Because I know he's had some really good games too. I think some of his best games and some of his worst games as a Kraken have both come in this season. Feels like
Yeah.
we've seen some really high highs and some really low lows.
Yeah. No, I would probably agree with that. It's I think a lot of it comes down to because Vince Dunn has kind of turned into that really solid net front defender. That was traditionally what Lars did, right? If you look back at year one, whether he was playing with Lauzon or with Vince Dunn later in the year, and then all through season two playing with Vince Dunn, Adam Larson was very stationary, very much planted in front of the net. Last year, him and Vince Dunn kind of traded responsibilities in the defensive zone where, they were like, okay, Vince Dunn, he's a lot better, using his stick, being able to body guys in front of the net and kind of gain that inside position that you want there. He's gotten a lot better at reading plays, and so he can kind of take more of that net front role because most defensive systems, you want one of your defensemen to be able to kind of flex out, go to the corners, go along the boards, and be a big body that's going to be able to lay out a big hit, tie people up along the boards, kind of win those board battles for you. And Vince Dunn's not that guy, right? He's got good size, but he's not a guy that's ever going to, lead your team in hits. Right, that's just not Vince Dunn's game. So as Vince Dunn learned those nuances of net front defending, last year they really switched Adam Larson out into that role where he's going to go out and try to lay the body and try to win those board battles for your team and tie people up below the goal line and all of that kind of stuff. And I just don't think he's as good at it. And I think the big thing is he's not as rangy in the sense that his skating maybe isn't as great. He's not as quick. He's not, his acceleration isn't all the fastest. So if he needs to get back into a position, he can't always do that. So the times where it works and against the teams that it can work against, I think it all plays very well. And Adam Larson's able to go out there and tie people up, and the Kraken are able to get possession back and move it up the ice and get their transition going. But if you're playing against a quick, kind of speedy, sneaky team that's going to be able to go in, and then when they see Lars coming, they're going to be able to redirect themselves or make a quick pass to somebody else and get their, get a short cycle game going. Those are the games where we see Larson and we're just like, where is he? Like, what is his positioning? And it's because he doesn't necessarily always have the speed to always get back in time for those. And so I don't want to blame Larson all the time for that because, to be perfectly honest, those teams going in, you probably find a way to game plan and have the two different defensemen take on the two different responsibilities given your opponent on a nightly basis. But based on me watching that defensive pair as close as I watch them, that's really what I've noticed these last 2 years, is that Adam Larson is trying to, kind of go out there a little bit more. And there are just some teams that are able to take advantage of the fact that, yeah, he is a little bit older and he's not as quick as he used to be. And you can kind of, you can exploit that if you're looking for it.
And I think we're seeing that a little bit too, just he's averaging over 2 minutes of ice time less than last year.
Yeah.
And I think that's just a bit of a transition into that role. And of course, when you have Brandon Montour, you could do that.
Yes. Yeah, no, it's true. And I think that's been very helpful, is having Brandon Montour as somebody who can go out there and kind of take on that role. I still think Adam Larson's does a great job of helping push the puck up the ice. He does a great job of holding the blue line, actively and aggressively defending the Kraken blue line as other teams are coming through in transition. I mean, that's something that I feel like Vince Dunn still needs to learn. That's really where we still see a lot of the old Vince Dunn, is in those like last game, right? Kind of pinches up at the wrong time and all of a sudden gets burned. Adam Larson, that never happens to, right? Like he's so consistent as far as defending that. I guess there's been times where he's drifted out of position, but it hasn't been a pinch up. So I guess I could say that. And the other thing, looking at things, Adam Larson, I mean, he's still second best defenseman on this team from a expected goals for percentage, right? Like him and Vince Dunn are the D pair that have been most consistent for this group as far as winning that game possession battles. So even though he's maybe not quite the defender he was year one and year two, Lars, I feel like, is a little bit more on track this year, and they've done a better job of kind of, he's done a better job of learning when to pick and choose those battles, kind of going away from the net front.
Yeah, no, I that's a
Not to
fair
spend like an
evaluation.
hour talking about Adam Larson or anything.
All good. No, I know if I get you started, I had two separate questions for you,
Yeah.
so I knew that could amount to a lot of time. But I think we should get moving to the next D pair.
Yes. Yeah. So Brandon Montour, RJ, I mean, best Kraken free agent signing this year. Like, not even close,
No
probably.
question. Yeah,
Yeah,
no,
yeah,
it's not
no.
close.
Brandon Montour's done a great job. Was a godsend when Vince Dunn had to miss the games that he had to miss earlier this season, because you still had a very effective puck moving defenseman out there, somebody who is capable of playing well over 20 minutes a night. He's still doing that for this group. He's been great to have on the power play. He is tied with Vince Dunn and Eeli Tolvanen for fourth on the team in goal scoring. He has given you 8 goals as the Kraken just are able to find a lot of offense from their blue line. Brandon Montour has just been exactly kind of what this Kraken blue line needed, in the sense of just another guy who can do what Vince Dunn can do.
Right. They have a second number 1D now. You just have another one of those, and that can really come in handy, especially last game where Adam Larson missed the third period and Brandon Montour had to finished with 29-40 of ice time, right? He played over 13 minutes in the third period alone, and just having somebody who can do that is huge for any team, and do that effectively. Yeah, he has exceeded expectations, that's for sure, when he was signed. And I think given the money and term he was given, those expectations were pretty high. But I think he's been even better than advertised, and also in a leadership role in the locker room as well. He's somebody that I think has really, kind of brought everyone together and brought the energy at times, right? For a team that can kind of, I feel like when things aren't going well, get a little bit somber, get kind of down on themselves. Montour has said, look, we just need to have more fun. He's keeps things light, keeps things loose. And I think that's something that was missing in the locker room. And especially with him taking over as locker room DJ, that's a great way to be able to control the vibe and everything too. So I think on and off the ice, he's been a great fit.
Yeah, no, totally agree. Love his skating too. I mean, obviously we knew what a good skater he was from watching him in, all the way back in Anaheim, right? And then through Buffalo and Florida. And there's just been so many times where, Kraken have like a defensive breakdown in transition, and his skating ability has allowed him to get back there and make a stop when, nobody else probably was going to. So it's been great to have Brandon Montour around. His defensive partner, Jamie Alexiak, largely just feels like Jamie Alexiak's just doing what Jamie Alexiak does, which is, again, providing you very solid second D pair minutes and play.
Yeah, I mean, but I think important too is that Alexiak, he's been a good fit with Brandon Montour, and the Kraken desperately needed somebody who was going to fit well with Montour and be a good D partner. Because if they couldn't find somebody, I think they were in real trouble given that free agent signing. And I think compare it to their other big free agent signing in Chandler Stevenson, right, where they haven't been able to find somebody to have the real chemistry with him. And you can see how disastrously that can go. I think it could have been look, Montour was always going to play great, I feel like, but if you couldn't find a solid defensive partner for him, I think it could have been a lot worse. And Alexiak has done that. And as a result, he's played bigger minutes too. He stepped into a bigger role. I think he's done well.
Yeah, no, I think he has. And the fact that having a Brandon Montour to play with versus, say, like a Will Borgen, somebody who's going to be able to handle himself in the offensive zone very well and do all of those kinds of things, has helped Jamie Alexiak focus a little bit more defensively and up his play there as well a little bit, right? Like, in the past, he's been the shot blocker last year, right? 177 block shots. Felt like a lot of that was because in the defensive zone, Kraken were kind of having to play desperate. Jamie Alexiak's able to go out there and use his reach a little bit more, right? He's not having to play as close to home and rely on things like shot blocking when he has somebody with the skating ability and understanding of the game like Brandon Montour on his pair. He can go out there and just kind of use that long reach that he has and try to disrupt plays in a way that he really wasn't able to before, just given all the different guys he was paired with.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the areas for improvement are like the same as they always are, like, playing a little more physically, kind of having that presence in front of the net. But I'm I feel like we're kind of just past that. We just
Yeah.
know that's not who he is.
Yeah, he is who he is. We know what we're getting from him, and it's been consistent. Which on this team, you take
Exactly.
that, right? Like you take that. Riker Evans, next one up here. Riker Evans, RJ, averaging over 20 minutes of ice time so far this season. We knew Dan Bausma loved having Riker around in Coachella Valley. That has continued so far this year. He was able to step up in Vince Dunn's absence, take over running one of the power play units, playing some big minutes at times up on the top pair with Adam Larson. Um, I think everything is kind of going the way that it basically should from him, right? I think we would have expected him to, be more of a power play presence last year, but given the addition of Brandon Montour, and to be perfectly honest, the step up from Vince Dunn with the new power play coaching that they've gotten this year has kind of made it that you don't need Riker in that spot because you have two more established NHL veterans there.
Right. And so with Riker Evans, I think he's stepped up in the times where the team has needed him. It's really been two separate half of seasons, right, for him. It's been the time when Vince Dunn was out, which is basically amounts to about half of the first half so far. And then the times when Vince Dunn was in, and he's had to play two very different roles. He's had to step up and basically be Vince Dunn and do his best Vince Dunn impression. I thought he's done a pretty great job with that during the time where they needed him to do that. And then he's also had to kind of step back into more of a third pairing role. He's had some different D partners. He's had, Will Borgen recently, Josh Mahura, and he's had to adapt to that. Those are some different defensemen he's had to work with. And it feels like he's just been adaptable into whatever role that they've needed from him. And we're not seeing the same numbers. We're not seeing the same production now, but because his role is so much smaller, but I think he's every bit as good. He just doesn't really have that opportunity given all the other great defensemen the Kraken have.
Yeah, and we're seeing him learn to be an NHL defenseman. He's not able to drop as low in the offensive zone anymore and kind of cycle below the goal line and around the net. He has to worry about other teams attacking with speed in transition, right? Because the game is just faster than the AHL game. So we've seen that bit kind of go. He still struggles, in my opinion, as a net front defender. But look, we talked about that with Vince Dunn, right? That was something Vince Dunn didn't totally get down until like year 3 with the Kraken, right? There's just so much that defensemen need to learn as they're coming up and as they get more and more NHL action. I'm sure it will come for Riker Evans. It hasn't been great so far this season, but each time it happens, right, there's a lesson learned, and I'm sure he'll get better. But it's been interesting to see him already learn some of those lessons. Like I said, with defending against transitions, you don't have to worry about bad pinches from him. He understands kind of how he has to play things through the neutral zone now. Josh Mahura, RJ, fantastic depth signing this past season to bring in a guy who, he is like a 6th, 7th defenseman kind of in the National Hockey League. But when he has had to step into the Kraken lineup, and he is going to need to for the rest of this year after the Will Borgen trade, he has been as serviceable as anybody the Kraken have ever had on their bottom pairing.
Right. Of all the new Kraken players, I think he has actually exceeded expectations the most. I know we talked about how Brandon Montour exceeded expectations, but Mahura, I was thinking, he's someone who is going to come in and just try and battle for a roster spot, for that 7th D spot. And if he doesn't win that battle too, he's playing in Coachella Valley this year. And so to go from that to playing so well that really it made Will Borgen expendable. Mm-hmm. And I didn't think that was going to be possible really going into the season, but Mahura has done that. He outplayed Will Borgen, who was an established NHL defenseman, and earned a spot on this blue line. And he's just so steady. You hardly ever notice him, but for a defensive defenseman, that's what you want, because generally the only things you're going to notice if they're not out there creating offense is mistakes. And you just rarely notice a mistake from Josh Mahura.
No, and I think as the team transitioned more to this skating 200-foot style game, he's just a better fit than Will Borgen was, right? Will Borgen could pop off occasionally offensively, something like that, but Will Borgen, not the skater Josh Mahura is, right? So much of what I've felt like Josh Mahura, when he's made his presence really felt, when he's really kind of come through for this group, has been defending back in transition, being able to get back with speed and keep the play in front of him. Right? Like he's able to get back with speed, get himself turned around, and be able to be a presence defensively that other teams have to account for. And in this system as a third pairing defenseman, I mean, that's what you need. Could he contribute more offensively? I mean, in a perfect world, you'd want everybody to, right? He's probably the, he's just not going to do that for you. But when you're talking about, your sixth defenseman, having that kind of reliable presence defending against other teams' transitions when that's the most deadly thing in the NHL right now. You take that every day of the week. And so I think Josh Mahura has been absolutely fantastic for this team. And I know the analytics would say that he's the worst defenseman now as part of the group after Will Borgen from like an expected goals share. But like I said, he's not adding necessarily too much offensively, and his numbers as a sixth defenseman are not that bad anyway. Even though it's the worst of this group, Kraken just have a very deep group, so I think it's all good.
Exactly, it's the worst of a good group, and again, he's being paid league minimum.
Yeah,
and he's
like
defenseman. Like,
yeah,
you take that.
You're absolutely taking what you're getting from him. Moving up to the forward group, RJ. Let's start with the top line. Right, we'll kind of
let's do it.
Go with that. And that top line right now, RJ, has been Matty Beniers centering Jaden Schwartz and Kaapo Kakko. Do we start with the centers or do we end with the centers? That becomes the big question.
Ooh, okay. I feel like we should start with the centers.
Okay.
I feel like everything, it starts and ends with the centers, but
yes.
Let's start with the centers.
So Matty Beniers, we've talked about this now a little bit, right? So much of what Matty Beniers needed to work on this season was adding weight, adding muscle, getting stronger so that he could go to the net front, so that he could go to the slot, so that he could go to the inside in the offensive zone, RJ. And you know what? Maybe he got bigger. In theory, he got bigger. But realistically, what we can point to, because we can't necessarily say for sure if he got bigger, what we can point to is he is going to the interior a lot more. He is going to the inside. He is getting shots from high danger areas. Unfortunately for him, this dude has the worst shooting luck of any player I think I've ever seen, RJ, just as far as getting high danger chances and then somehow shooting at a single digit numbers from those areas in a way that I don't know that I've ever seen before.
It's wild. Even last season, when we talked about how snake bitten Matty was, when he had those stretches where he just was not scoring. I mean, you could take all of last season and just say, look, that did not go right for him. And so we expected the bounce back. He was still shooting at 11.3%.
Right.
He's down at 9.6% this season. And we looked into it. We dug into it. And he's not really getting worse chances than he was last year. In a lot of ways, he's getting better chances. He's getting to those areas. The pucks just haven't been going in for him. Except recently they have. He had that stretch of, 3-game goal streak. And I know those were some kind of fluky goals. But I just count that as the luck evening out for him because he was due for a few, right? Now, I think that is all on bad luck. I do think you have to point a little bit to something I've been talking about really since he arrived with the Kraken, of his shot being predictable. Mm-hmm. He has his spot he likes to go to, right over the pad, under the glove. And it is something that if goalies watch their film, which most NHL goalies do, you can kind of predict that pretty well and get to that spot to stop it. So again, as always, I'd like to see more varied shooting from Matty Beniers, but he is getting chances from those danger areas. And so I know, if we were doing grades, right, I think a lot of people might be expecting like a D or an F or something for Matty Beniers. I wouldn't go that low just because it looks like he's been getting very unlucky and he has started to turn things around of late.
Yeah, he has. And I know, first line center, you expect a certain level of on paper production from that. And he has not met those expectations. We've talked about he probably never will compared to certain other teams' number one centers, just because that's never really been his game. I think, yes, he's had the bad luck this year. I just checked. He's still below half of what league average is as far as shooting percentage from high danger chances. So again, that's it. I don't think that's all just him like choosing to bad shot placement and stuff like that. There's an element of bad luck there that in theory should even out and is potentially already starting to for him. But I also look at other like advanced stuff on like NHL Edge. Dude's covering ground at an amazing rate. His skating distance so far this year is in the 91st percentile in the NHL. Dan Bylsma wanted this to be a skating team. Matty Beniers has taken that to heart. One of the things that I loved about him back when the 2021 draft was happening was his motor, was his ability to get up the ice and help out offensively, and then to get all the way back and defend deep into his defensive zone. Matty Beniers has been doing that in this new system. He's kept up his defensive play from before, where he is, again, just one of the best offensive centers in the NHL, one of the best Kraken performers when it comes to the defensive metrics here for the forwards and everything. I look at like high danger chances. He's above 50% there. That not a lot of guys on this team that can say that, right? Especially at the center position, which we'll get to as we go down the lineup. But Matty Beniers is still defending. He's taken to heart the new system. He's got the motor to be able to skate in it. He is going and getting those higher danger chances. He's doing all of the things that he needs to be doing to improve. It's just a matter of, can he at the end get the result?
Right. And I want to add something too when we're talking about Matty Beniers, and also later when we talk about Shane Wright, kind of for the centers as a whole. I just want to get this out of the way now because we're talking about Beniers and starting the center conversation. I think there are some people that might want us to be a little bit harsher on the centers, particularly Beniers and Wright, because look, the team still isn't doing well. They're not producing massive numbers, especially in Beniers' case, right? But I want to give them more of a break here as we're evaluating them, because the Kraken went out and spent big money on a center that was supposed to shelter Matty Beniers and Shane Wright and give them the more favorable matchups and make it so Matty Beniers didn't have to be the true 1C that he is being right now. And we'll get to him and his Stevenson, his evaluation later, but he hasn't been that guy. Yeah. And I will be happy to talk about that with Stevenson, but I feel like that's not Beniers or Wright's fault, that the player they went out to go do a specific job has not been able to do that job effectively. And that's why I'm, not being as harsh on those two as maybe some others are. Because look, I understand if you're somebody listening to this podcast and rightfully saying, look, the Kraken haven't lived up to expectations at all. They have not been good enough. Mm-hmm. And especially the forward group, because nobody in this forward group is producing. Why aren't you guys being tougher on them? That's my explanation here as we're starting off, saying mostly good things about Matty Beniers, right? Is that it's not his fault that he's still having to be thrust into this 1C role that the team was hoping to shelter him from.
Yeah. I mean, you could make the argument of, should the guy that you pick second overall need to be sheltered 4 seasons in, right? Kind of like there is an argument to be had there. And I think that is one. And I've talked about it for a long time, right? Matty Beniers is a great second line center. He is having to be the first line center again for this team, and his production matches that, right? He is a great defensive center. He struggles in the offensive zone. He's going to give you, if he's back on track and able to have some fortunate luck down the stretch, or if he had good, decent average luck over the course of a year, he's going to give you like 60 points, right? Like that's just who he is, but that's kind of who he's always been. It's just been that, the Kraken were in a draft where that was worthy of being the second overall pick, right? So that you can't control the prospects that are available in any given draft. And you could also look at his contract, the extension that he signed, and say like, okay, I want a little bit more from somebody making over $7 million. And I think that is reasonable. I just think that we're going to see some more of that production down the stretch, or in theory we should, as his luck evens out, and we'll see. Moving over to his line mates, RJ, I feel like we got to start with Jaden Schwartz, who's been just an absolute revelation here coming out of the holiday break. He's been on fire. He's scoring goals. He's tied for the team lead in goals with 13, which again, I will also say for Matty Beniers' production, if he had wingers that produced, right? Like,
you also have to look at his line mates, right? He's not playing with star players at all. We still don't know what that really looks like.
Yeah. So, but Jaden Schwartz has been as good as anybody has been here as of late, RJ. He's been a great leader on, and it seems like off the ice for this group in Jordan Eberle's absence, as Jordan Eberle is recovering from his injury. Like I said, he's tied for the team league in goals. Look, he has always played this style that we have said more guys on this team need to play. He is a net front guy. He goes to the net. And what we've seen from him as of late, RJ, is a player that does not want to lose and is going to go out there and do everything in his power to make sure that his team doesn't lose. Might not always work because you need the rest of the team to go with you, but that's still impressive from a group that went months last year without us seeing that from anybody.
Right. And Jordan Eberle was able to step up early this season and kind of take on that role. And after he got injured, there was a while where just nobody was doing that for this team. And Jaden Schwartz, at a certain point, really at the holiday break, just stepped up and was like, look, I'm going to be the de facto captain at this point. I'm going to will this team to victory in any way that I can. And he earns a lot of credit for me from that, because I don't know that anybody else was going to do it if he didn't. And so that that earns him a lot of points in my book. And I mean, the production is there, right? Compared to this team anyway, right? He's tied for the team leading goals. He's tied for second on the team in points. And of all of these middle-class contract forwards that we kind of lament that the Kraken are in this situation, so many of them that do not pull their weight. Jaden Schwartz is pulling his weight.
Yeah.
He is earning that $5.5 million contract.
Right. No, he is. And again, it's one of those, in a perfect world, are you talking about Jaden Schwartz as your top line forward? Probably not. But on this group and with this team, he is. And he's stepping up and he's doing his best job to be a top line forward for them and to be a leader as one of the more veteran guys in the locker room, as one of the guys who has won a Stanley Cup in the past. He has really taken on a lot of that. And I give him a lot of credit for that and for just the continued, battling through all the injuries that he's had, both with his, really his entire career and everything like that. I really, really respect Jaden Schwartz and the game that he plays because of it.
Well, one more thing to add on Schwartz too. I mean, just the clutchness, right? He
Yeah.
has 5 game-winning goals for the Kraken. I believe the rest of the entire forward group has 7 combined?
Yeah, you've only got 2 others above 1, 2 other guys, and they're both at 2, and Shane Wright and Vince Dunn.
Yeah, so I'm counting. Yeah, 7 right there. Like,
Yeah,
so he's come up when it matters too. I mean, there's that element as well.
definitely. Kaapo Kakko, RJ's only played 7 games with the team, so it's very hard to kind of assess things, but he has been exactly what the doctor ordered, another net front presence, somebody who does have a little bit more of a skill upside, right? Yeah, he does have the pedigree similar to Matty Beniers, the second overall pick, has fit in very well with Jaden Schwartz and Matty Beniers, RJ, as somebody who can defend very well on the perimeter in the defensive zone, allow Matty Beniers to get inside a little bit more and defend other teams' number 1 Cs a little bit easier, which I think has helped him, or at least allowed Matty to then also focus on offense maybe a little bit more than he had to before or was able to before. So I love that aspect of Kaapo Kakko and just kind of the instant chemistry he's had with those 2 guys as far as really jumpstarting a line for a team that was otherwise in free fall. And, they were able to maybe level off the plane. Well, it's maybe still losing altitude, but it's a lot more level and Kaapo Kakko has played a big role in that.
Exactly. Coming out of the Christmas break, the Kraken needed a top line. They needed a legitimate top line they could put out there against good competition that could not get caved in and win some battles. That's exactly what this line has been. And Kakko's been a big part of it. I mean, he's a third of that line. And he's also produced pretty well too, at least by this team's standards, where it's only been 7 games, but if you take his point production and just put it over the 40 games that this team has played, with the Kraken, right? I mean, that's good for 5th on the team in scoring. Like he has produced. I mean, there were a couple back-to-back shifts the other game where he had set up breakaways on back-to-back shifts, which is pretty cool. Not a lot of Kraken players can do that, but he's really just highlighted how little of the traits that he brings the rest of this forward group has and how desperately they need them.
Yeah. And like I said, it's hard to talk too much about him because only 7-game sample size, but really happy to have him and happy that he should, in theory, be a part of this Kraken group for a while. Moving on to the second line, RJ, and I'm looking and we're already like 50 minutes in. Feels like we could probably spend 50 minutes talking about Chandler Stevenson. But look, the realities are what they are, right? This was not a signing that you and I thought was probably... We did not think it was good at the time. The day it happened, we did that podcast and we criticized it. You look at his play so far this season. I mean, the big thing over the holiday break was JFresh came out with his, the first group of player cards, and Chandler Stevenson, what, 1% or was it 0%?
It was 1%, I believe.
1%, right? Like just literally one of the worst forwards in the National Hockey League. A couple nights ago, if you were on Natural Stat Trick and you looked at expected goals for of forwards over 200 minutes played, there was 650 forwards, and Chandler Stevenson was dead last. He was the worst of all those 650 forwards. I know there are people that look at just, like I'm on Hockey Reference right now, RJ, right? Defaults to sorting by points. He's fourth on the team in points. Why do we give him such a hard time? He is fourth on the team in points, but he's got more power play points than he does even strength points, right? His defense has been, I wish I could say non-existent, but it seems like downright detrimental at times, right? Like we could spend a lot of time talking about all the ways that this contract has just already aged poorly. But the bottom line is, like you said earlier, Chandler Stevenson was brought in to do something. That was to, kind of help elevate this team, take on the Alexander Wenberg role from before, help shelter the young guys and kind of allow them to grow. And he's not doing that because right now he's like borderline unplayable.
Exactly. And I think that's the biggest point with Chandler Stevenson. And we can talk about the stats and the metrics all we want. I mean, defensively on this JFresh card, 0th percentile. So, among the worst forwards in the NHL. We can talk about that all we want. But I think we have to look at the big picture of the job that he was brought in to do. And that was to be a center on a line that could take away some of the top competition of other teams and could at least be even, right? Could at least take that time and pressure off of Matty Beniers and Shane Wright and give them the more favorable matchups so that they could grow, so that they could build confidence in their game. And Stevenson and his line, really anybody they put him with, has just been a massive liability for the Kraken, to the point where Matty Beniers has had to now step up and have that line be the top line, which really is not the ideal role for him. Shane Wright, they were able to shelter him for kind of a little while, right? But they were getting caved in when Stevenson was out there. And it's become a massive problem. Probably the biggest problem for this team is that they don't have anybody to play that role. And so I look at it too, and I compare him to Alex Wenberg, because when that player card came out, I figured the one potential saving grace for Chandler Stevenson, even though the numbers and the performance were awful, you have to look at the competition that he's against, right? Is he facing the other team's top line night in, night out? Is he facing the McKinnons, the McDavids of the world, right? Every night. And so the reason that the numbers are so bad is because he's just so outmatched. Not really. That was the most disappointing thing, is that I look at they have a quality of competition, right? And it's based on percentiles in the league, 73%. So he is playing good competition. He's facing good competition, right? But I wanted to compare that to, say, Alex Wenberg, who I think was playing a very similar role for the Kraken last season. And at the time that Wenberg was traded, his quality of competition was in the 90th percentile compared to Stevenson's 73. And then you look at quality of teammates. So the teammates that you have with you, right? Stevenson, 60%. So he's got some decent teammates with him as well. Wenberg, 49%. So that tells me that Alex Wenberg was facing tougher competition with worse teammates than Chandler Stevenson is, and doing significantly better. And so I don't think there's any question at this point that Stevenson has been a massive downgrade from even Alex Wenberg, who I think at the time we figured, look, he was doing what he can. He is the guy he is, right? But he just is not good enough in that role. That's why they went to go try and find an upgrade. But instead, Stevenson's been a massive downgrade, and the effects down the lineup have been massive.
Right. I mean, the big one, and we can even use this as a transition to kind of move forward and talk about Jared McCann. He's done seemingly the impossible, and he's made Jared McCann disappear, right? Jared McCann had been able to produce with the Seattle Kraken regardless of who he's been playing with, right? Like for years, right? Like he's been on some bad Kraken teams, right? Jared McCann was always able to produce. Jared McCann's not producing right now, right? We looked at this before we started recording. Jared McCann leads the Kraken with 28 points. That is the lowest point total of anybody to lead an NHL team this year, right? He only has 13 goals through 40 games. Like I said earlier, that's tied with Jaden Schwartz for the team lead. Like Jared McCann is really struggling out there, and it's largely because he's been paired with Chandler Stevenson for a lot of this year. And Chandler Stevenson has just kind of become this weird black hole where anybody who's put with him just kind of disappears. And that's happening to Jared McCann. And it's tough because you don't want to break up Shane Wright's chemistry with his line mates in Tolvanen and Oliver Bjorkstrand. So you don't want to necessarily put Jared McCann there. Matty Beniers,
although they did briefly, even
they did
kind of prop Stevenson up. They even tried that.
Yeah, they did try that. It just doesn't work. Like nothing works for Chandler Stevenson, and so like the best you can do is to put your, arguably your best forward there in Jared McCann, and it's just it's such a awful situation, right? Like it's just a really bad situation all the way around. Kind of what Chandler Stevenson has done to this lineup, and Jared McCann, it feels like, has been the biggest person impacted.
Absolutely. And as we kind of move over to talking about McCann, right? I mean, he started the season so hot. He was on a 40 goal pace.
Right,
Again, we're thinking, man, is he going to, break
playing
more
with
Kraken
yeah.
goal records this season? And when the change happened, I mean, really, it coincided almost exactly with being put on Chandler Stevenson's line. And I remember at the time thinking, okay, well, let's not panic because they can always take him off of there, right? It's just for as long as he's on the Stevenson line, this is going to continue. But he's been there for a while. They haven't really taken him off in any kind of meaningful sense. They put him on the Matty Beniers line instead of Schwartz briefly, but that didn't work out exactly, chemistry wise. And so they put him back with Stevenson. And as a result, I mean, he's been on this now prolonged scoring drought for him. And he just doesn't look like the same player because he doesn't have players that he can kind of feed off of. And it's tough because you don't want to mess with the other two lines, but you really have nowhere to put him now.
Right. Like it's just there's you're like running out of things to kind of say. It's really unfortunate. I still feel like he could be used probably better special teams wise, and maybe get going with some more power play production. Jared McCann, but really I just think as long as he's with Chandler Stevenson, like this is just what to expect.
I think so. And you talk about the power play, and they did get him some good looks a few games ago. That little stretch where they had of the kind of inspired power play where he's on the left side. He had some good shots from his spot, but he didn't convert on any of them, and that's on him. But
Yeah.
they've tried him out kind of in a one-timer spot. Unfortunately, I do think for the power play, he is a little one-dimensional.
hmm Yes, that is
But if
true.
you have other good players around it, like if you had a one-timer threat on the right side, that could open up Jared McCann's one dimension and let him do his thing because teams have to respect other things.
Right.
But the Kraken just don't have anybody to do that.
Yeah, I was just looking at his high danger chances for and against because this season it's poor, and again that's largely because of playing with Chandler Stevenson, where Chandler Stevenson is giving up high danger chances against at a 2-to-1 clip to what they've been able to generate, and yeah, it's a huge drop off for Jared McCann. This is Jared McCann in Seattle, 51.53%, 52%. 49.2% last year, and then this year 43.62, right? You're talking about a huge drop off there in Jared McCann's ability to generate high danger chances for his team, help eliminate those chances defensively. He was those are consistent numbers, right? Plus or minus 3% for him the first 3 seasons with this team. And then all of a sudden you're talking about, a close to double digit drop off this year just because of who he's been playing with. I can't imagine that Jared McCann has gotten worse.
No, I don't think so. And would you agree that nobody has missed Jordan Eberle more?
Yeah, I would
team?
agree with that. I would definitely agree with that. Moving over to the other side of things here with this line, RJ, it's Andre Burakovsky, who again has been a disappointment this year. I've tried to defend him at times and his style of play. I love the controlled zone entries from him. He became very predictable with those, but then he kind of shook things up a little bit. But the bottom line is, RJ, he's only produced 15 points so far through 37 games, has been scratched a couple times or missed time, and then also only 3 goals, which has been a big thing, right? Again, never really been a super high goal scorer, but you expect a little bit more than that.
Absolutely. And I think at a certain point, we could point to the injury woes in the last couple seasons with Burakovsky, but at a certain point, when you're paid that kind of money, when you're brought in to be a top 6 forward, you just have to produce on the score sheet. And Burakovsky hasn't really been doing that. Turnovers have been an issue as well. Like he has some very bad games. He's got some good games where he looks like his old self, but they're few and far between. And you look at him and Chandler Stevenson, and those are really the two just big albatross contracts that they have at the forward position. And he's probably played his way into looking at a buyout territory this offseason. And really, he's been a healthy scratch at times this season. I think he's probably the team's in some ways, depending on how the lineup shakes out, the team's 12th forward at this point. I know he's playing in that top 6 role with Chandler Stevenson, but he's been swapped out for Daniel Sprong. He's, because he doesn't really fit in the bottom 6 anywhere, and he's not really giving top 6 production. He just doesn't especially the way this team plays, he just doesn't really fit.
No, he doesn't. And it's one where, again, if you're looking at like expected goal share, that kind of stuff, right? Chandler Stevenson's at the bottom. The other person really kind of dragging down the forward group um, is Andre Burakovsky. And I'm sure some of that is because they're playing with each other and they're kind of feeding each other. But you're talking about a big drop off from everyday forwards down to them, and that tells me that there is something there. I was just going and I was trying to look at his NHL Edge numbers, RJ, to see, like, is he getting shots from high danger areas? He kind of is. Andre Burakovsky, he kind of is. They just haven't necessarily always gone in for him. That being said, high danger, shots for him, RJ, going in at slightly above league average. He is shooting 23.1% when he gets those high danger chances. Which is over twice what Matty Beniers is shooting currently in those spots. The problem for him is that he's just not getting shots on goal. Like, that's the problem.
Yeah.
Like, he's just not shooting the puck at all. I'm sure some of that has to do with probably doesn't have a ton of confidence too right now, given how the season has gone for him. But 53 shots in 37 games is just not enough for somebody that you're paying to be one of your higher end forwards.
And Coach Bilesma has talked about that shooting mentality, right? This is something that they are just trying to drill into this team. Shoot more, put more pucks on net, especially in those key areas. And I feel like Burakovsky has probably resisted that message the most of any of the forwards, even guys that are normally hesitant to shoot. When it's become a point of emphasis, they'll just throw more pucks on net just because, right? Everyone's telling them they need to do it. They'll do it. It feels like Burakovsky just loves to pass up chances. He had a couple games earlier in the season, right, where it seemed like he got that message. He was shooting a little bit more, but after a couple games, it just went away. And we've seen 2-on-1s. We've seen, a couple games ago, he had that great 2-on-1 chance with Chandler Stevenson against Vancouver, with a chance to put his team up 2-0 and really go and kind of drive the hammer into Vancouver early, right? And he just telegraphs the pass all the way, passes it right into the defender's stick, and it gets intercepted. And Demko had just allowed a soft goal from that very spot like a few minutes ago. And maybe it is a confidence thing, but at a certain point, you got to earn your confidence, right? You got to give yourself a chance to build that confidence.
Yeah. I mean, and look, the shots on goal thing, by the way, huge team problem. Like, it's
not just him. I'll say that.
It is crazy sorting this team by the shots on goal. The amount of guys that are down at around one shot per game is fairly unacceptable, right? Especially because you are talking about like Shane Wright, who we can transition to and talk about next. Chandler Stevenson below a shot on goal per game. Like, here's a quick, easy way if you are one of these guys that is struggling with the advanced metrics and everything. Generate more shots. That will help you, actually. Like, that's a way to build up your expected goal share a little bit, is to have something that could positively add to it. So I don't know, just an idea for a lot of this group. But I'm looking. I mean, there's only a handful of guys, RJ, that are averaging 2 shots on goal per game, and your team leader is Brandon Montour. It's an issue.
Yeah.
It's a group effort thing. Shane Wright. Weird season for Shane Wright so far. If we had been doing this at the quarter mark, we would have said it's pretty disappointing. Started off in a bottom 6 capacity, very much embraced being a bottom 6 centerman, was playing fantastic defense and was a fantastic forechecker, but that is not what you want to see from Shane Wright. Gets scratched for 3 games, comes back, has the offensive production from that point on in the season. RJ, for a while there, was really right around a point per game for him. It's maybe tailed off a little bit here coming out of the holiday break, but still, he has kind of really turned his season around, and hopefully he's able to keep that going for the rest of the year.
Right. And it's really a tale of 2 seasons for Shane Wright. You had the beginning,
at the halfway point.
At the halfway point. Yeah, I know. But you can find a clear dividing line there, as I'm trying to pull up, the exact, like, his production is since that healthy scratch. But it's, I think the team kind of had to adjust the plan a little bit for Shane Wright, because he did embrace that bottom 6 mentality a little bit too much. But since they've done that, again, I kind of see the vision here of where they're going with, right? They wanted to give him third line matchups, right? And just let him feast against easy competition. He's been really effective at doing that. He produced a lot after the healthy scratch. Here we go. Now I got it. But in his in 19 games since healthy scratch, he has 15 points. Like, at that pace and at that level, I mean, that's near the top of the team, right? You take that
Yeah.
and extrapolate it, right? And he's among the leading scorers there. And so he's been doing his job in that respect. Recently, the numbers have died down just a little bit, but I think it's because the quality of competition has gone up a little bit. I think they have given his line a little bit more of a challenge as far as competition. And part of it is, I think, to shelter Chandler Stevenson in that line a little bit,
Yeah.
right? And so I think the production's going down, but I still think they fared pretty well in that time.
Yeah, his defensive metrics have taken a little bit of a hit as well. I mean, especially when we were really talking about things at that kind of quarter mark of the season before his healthy scratch stint, he was one of the best defensive players on the Kraken. Like, just his metrics were truly incredible as far as just keeping really anything from happening. Like a good defenseman, RJ, nothing happened when Shane Wright was out on the ice, right? And it meant nothing was happening for his team, but he was really effective at keeping other teams from being able to just generate chances at all. And that's, there is something to be said for that. He's continued that a little bit. He's kind of gotten more to average. All of his metrics are now kind of around 50% from, like, high danger chance percentage or expected goals share. It's all around 50%, but again, still puts him in the upper group for this team. You still take that from a young developing center, and one who has increased his offensive production for you. So I still think so far everything as of the last like 25 games or whatever have been pretty solid for Shane Wright.
And I think his ice time needs to be mentioned as well. He still
Yes.
hasn't played more than 16, 17 in a game
Yeah.
in his entire
He
career.
needs to
We
do
do
that.
not know what it looks like for even one game in the NHL for Shane Wright to be playing top 6 minutes. And his production per 60 is fantastic. I mean, you look at any of the players that have scored more than him on this team, and they're averaging like 4 minutes more per game than he is. That's a lot more opportunities to go out there and score and produce something. So I think that also just needs to be taken into account.
Yep, definitely. Oliver Bjorkstrand, the maestro, RJ, one of the most consistent guys on this group. He is an analytics darling as far as what he does. He's one of the top guys on this team. He plays consistently. He's doing his thing. He's one of the few guys who will shoot when he is out there, RJ. And I mean, just good things to say about Oliver Bjorkstrand, particularly if, you're talking about him being a middle six winger for you or somebody to play with a developing center and Shane Wright on the third line. I feel like, he's as good as you can get.
Yeah, he's one of the few middle class contracts there in this forward group that actually is pulling their weight. And he had a super hot streak at earlier in the season, right? And it came at just the right time to help build that confidence for your young setter in Shane Wright. You needed some players to put with him who were going to play well and going to help him kind of grow. And I think Bjorkstrand was right there at the correct time to help that. So that was huge, the timing of that hot streak. But yeah, I mean, he's producing well enough. He's not lighting the world on fire, right? I mean, 26 points in 39 games is okay, right? But he's being paid roughly about the amount you'd expect that kind of production, and he's doing his job. And I think that's not something you can say for all of these forwards. So he gets a passing grade in my book.
Same here. Eeli Tolvanen is a really interesting one, RJ, because you do sign him as an RFA, you give him that pay bump. 15 points in 40 games is not great production. However, I look at like his actual game on the ice and I'm like, this is the most consistent forechecker as far as if you have to dump and chase, Eeli Tolvanen's the guy on this team. I want to go and do the chasing. I think he's even better than Brandon Tanev as far as being able to actually tie up defensemen in their own zone, get them into a board battle, and then allow his teammates to come and get the puck, and you retain possession there. I think that's something that Eeli Tolvanen does. The other weird thing about this is, again, Eeli Tolvanen's tied for 4th on this team in goals for. And I think that this speaks a lot more about the team than it does Eeli Tolvanen, because eight goals in 40 games, probably what you're expecting from Eeli Tolvanen, right? Being on pace for 15 to 20 goals is I think what you're expecting from that guy. You're talking about a third line winger or somebody that you're paying what you're paying him for, and it's just that, again, on this team it feels like, wow, he's one of your more dangerous players, but he probably shouldn't.
Right, he shouldn't need to be, exactly. And so I think like he's performing in that role okay. And look, he has kind of a specialized role, with Bjorkstrand being a skill guy on that line, Shane Wright being one of the finishers, and all of that. Tolvanen goes in there and he's that wrecking ball on the forecheck. He's 23rd in the NHL in hits, And that's a trend that kind of started last season, where when he came to the Kraken, everyone was thinking, okay, he's this sniper. He's got this great shot. He's a little bit one dimensional, but he has become a really well-rounded player. And we almost don't even see that shot very much
Mm-hmm.
anymore. But he's kind of settled into that role. And I think he's doing a fine job of it, probably worth, right around what he's being paid, maybe a little bit less, but you could say that that's, the team's numbers kind of being brought down as a whole by how little they're scoring.
He's
But
justifying it more than a lot of other guys on this team are.
absolutely. So and he's part of that line that helped save Shane Wright's season. So I got to give him some credit for that too.
Yep. Fourth line, Yanni Gourde. He's just being Yanni Gourde, RJ. That being said, I just look, I feel like his talents are largely kind of wasted on this team. And
Definitely.
there's a lot of stuff that Yanni Gourde does very well, and I think he realistically could go and do those for a better team, and they would yield better results.
Yes, he's had to be kind of a stabilizer for this team, and him and whatever line mates, usually fourth line type line mates he's been put out with, they have to go have the shift all too often to kind of stop the bleeding
Mm-hmm.
and just go and forecheck and grind and try and just create something or spend some time in the offensive zone. But you're right, I think his talents are being wasted. Put him as a third line center or bottom six guy on a cup contending team with some good line mates, and that line can do almost exactly what he did in Tampa for those cup winning teams, right? On that third line, I think he can still very much do that. I think he can do that every bit as well as he did when he was winning Stanley Cups in Tampa. It's just he's not really able to do that here because there are too many holes to plug.
Right. You talk about him being a stabilizer for the Kraken. Yanni Gourde's at his best when he's a disruptor of the other team. And right now, he's just not able to do that. And that's just because, like you said, he is needed to do something different on this team. And as a veteran guy, as a very skilled and very smart hockey player, he can do that. But it doesn't feel like the best use of his talent and skill set. And I just, if you think you love watching Yanni Gourde play now, wait until
Watch
after
him
the
on a
trade
good team.
deadline.
Yeah, exactly.
Playing with Yanni Gourde, we've got Ty Cartier, who I feel like has, he's one of the most consistent from a motor perspective. He starts games on time, RJ. He finishes games on time. He's turned into just a pretty solid player. He's a good physical presence on the forecheck. But, it's a fourth line winger. He's just kind of doing what a fourth line winger is supposed to do.
Yeah, and the production isn't really there, 6 points in 37 games, but I think adjusted for this team, it's about right for a
Yeah.
fourth line winger. He does lead the team in hits. He's able to kind of get in the middle of scrums and whatnot when action does happen. So yeah, he's just out there doing his job. It's kind of what you expect from somebody, undrafted free agent that you signed to go play a bottom six role and do it cheaply.
Yeah, exactly. And then Brandon Tanev, who, you know what? I feel like this has been a pretty solid season from Brandon Tanev. 14 points, 7 goals in 39 games. He's been able to go out there and disrupt things. And I feel like he has done a good job, similar to Yanni Gourde, of stabilizing this team when they've needed him to, right? Any shifts with the line with Brandon Tanev after a goal against or something like that, Brandon Tanev is able to go out there and you're struggling to get the puck out of your zone. He's going to be able to get it in deep in the offensive zone and tie up the other team for a little bit. And there is value in that. It's just, I don't feel like it's being maximized out of this group, right? Like that's something you want while your big guns are resting, not to throw them out there after your big guns didn't get the job done.
Right, or even having to play a top six role, right? He's played alongside Chandler Stevenson at times in this game, this season, right? And so that's not really where you want him in a lineup, but he's still done well given all of that. He's already matched his goal total from all of last season. He's found that finish a little bit that we, maybe joked about him not having last year, especially on breakaway. He's got a couple breakaway goals. So good for him. It's been a bounce back year for him. And just like Yanni Gourde, you like watching Tanev play now. You think he's effective now. Just wait until he's on a good team.
Yep. And then Jordan Eberle, RJ, he's been missed a lot of time here. It's been a while since we've seen him, but when he was playing this year, he looked like he was back to like old school Jordan Eberle. He had embraced being captain of this team. He was going to the net front. It seemed like he was really doing a great job of taking all the stuff that the coaching staff was telling the players and going out there and really putting it to good use. It really has been a shame that he's had to miss as much time as he's missing.
Definitely. He's been greatly missed by this team. He did everything you can possibly ask on and off the ice for the Kraken earlier on this season. And you can point to him being injured as a time when things really started to kind of go off the rails for this team. I think there were other reasons behind it. I don't think it was just the Eberle injury, but it does coincide, right? I mean,
Yes.
there is
The
some
team
correlation there.
The team has definitely been worse without him.
For sure. And so, as a result, though, I think, we're not giving grades, but if you were, he's got to earn the highest marks.
Definitely. And then last player that met our cutoff from games played, Daniel Sprong with 10 games played. RJ, I'll let you do it because I think everybody probably knows my thoughts already.
Yeah, look, he's not good in the D zone. He's a one-dimensional player. We've heard it all before. I think he got unlucky in that the Kraken traded for him to try and get an offensive boost, and then about a week later just changed their entire team identity in the way that they wanted to play to a way where Sprong didn't really fit anymore. And so, yeah, he hasn't been the most effective. But I will say this in his defense, because of course I've got to go defend Daniel Sprong to close this out. He is the one player who I think has actually gelled with Chandler Stevenson. He's the only guy who has not been dragged down by Chandler Stevenson. I think they actually get the best out of each other. The two of them were working really well in that big first Canucks comeback. For some reason, he's just the guy that works with him. Couldn't tell you why, but it just works.
It does maybe seem to be that way. Look, I would be on board with Daniel Sprong if he was at least shooting at a super high volume or something like that. And he's just kind of not, right? 12 shots on goal in 10 games. Right, like if he was addressing some more of the issues of the team from an offensive perspective, I'd maybe be able to overlook the poor defense, but no. And him and Chandler Stevenson together in the defensive zone,
awful.
You're literally begging the other team to score against you. So I'm not on board with it at all. All right, well there it is. Broke down the roster. Look, we've talked a lot about the group as a whole and the kind of disappointments there and the lack of production and all of that kind of stuff from this core. I think there are bright spots in it. It's just been that, in certain cases, right, like the players that are not performing that well have had a very detrimental effect on others. And with the unit not playing well, as we talked about at the end there's just some guys on this group, RJ, that are just they're being asked to do things that they can do, but it's not maximizing their skill set, and it's not really what you'd prefer them to be doing.
That was a theme that came up a lot. And look, I know that's a problem with this team, but I wasn't expecting it to come up as much as it did, defending individual players because they're being asked to perform in a role that takes on too much or that isn't really matching their skill set or whatever it is. And I think at the end of the day, my biggest takeaway is just points to roster construction.
Yeah.
And I'll have plenty to say about that on the Armchair GM stream on the 24th.
I'm going to be very curious when Jordan Eberle comes back, if he's able to come back the way he played at the beginning of the year, and you're able to put him back with Jared McCann on Maddie's wing, and then you put Jaden Schwartz with Capo Caco with Chandler Stevenson, if there's enough defense and net front presence of those wingers that it can kind of help even things out with Chandler Stevenson. I wonder.
I would be interested to see that. I really would.
Yeah. Be very interesting. We'll see if we see it later on this season. Want to thank all of you for listening. Definitely want to thank everybody that said hi to us yesterday at the PWHL game, and especially want to thank the law offices of Rico Tessendorf for sponsoring the deep dive like they do each and every week. Again, if you ever need Rico services, you can reach out at 425-778-9800 for a free consultation, or go online to his website, ricotessendor.com, to schedule that free consultation. He's won millions of dollars for his clients and helped thousands of people in the greater Seattle area, and he will help you too. Thanks everybody for listening, and we will see you all next time.
Hey everyone, before we go, we just wanted to give a quick shout out to all of our awesome patrons over at patreon.com/Emerald City Hockey, especially our Terror of the Deep patrons.
Thank you so much for making all this possible. We really appreciate your support.